Hello, and thank you for joining us for the KREM 2 News Week in Review. I'm Cody Proctor. Each weekend, we walk you through the headlines from the past week in the Inland Northwest. Let's get started with one of the biggest news stories of the past few days.
Well, investigators say they seized about 200,000 deadly doses of fentanyl in this bust. And this is just one part of a larger long-term investigation involving both illicit drugs and firearms. One part of this 7-month-long investigation is an apartment complex near North Central High School that allegedly was used to distribute drugs and hold firearms.
This is not simply a drug problem. It is a public safety emergency.
The acting U.S. attorney is filing a civil complaint against the apartment complex, labeling it as a free-for-all safety issue.
These individuals, through their own choice, decided to traffic poison into our community for their own personal gain.
Law enforcement says in the past 2 years, 58 calls were made for service at that apartment, and other drugs related to this prosecution were being sold on Division Street and near the House of Charity.
Enough to dose every seat in the arena, every seat in the McCarthy Athletic Center at Gonzaga, and every seat at One Spokane Stadium, with thousands of lethal doses left over.
Barker characterized the arrest of the 21 individuals as repeat offenders, including one person accused of using their 12-year-old child to sell drugs and another whose child allegedly overdosed on their parents' supply.
The message is simple. If you traffic in fentanyl and fuel violence in our neighborhoods, we will find you, we will investigate you, and we will prosecute you.
And as for those 21 individuals, some are set to be arraigned tomorrow in federal court. It was also announced that in the coming weeks, a new U.S. Special Assistant Attorney will be hired to target more of these drug trafficking networks. I'm reporting in Spokane, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
We've now learned a federal grand jury handed down an indictment against Martin Diaz Wednesday, essentially saying prosecutors have enough evidence he could be convicted on his federal charge. Thursday, a U.S. District Court judge entered a not guilty plea on Diaz's behalf. He's charged with assaulting a Border Patrol agent during his April arrest. An affidavit says during this struggle, caught on the couple's security camera, Diaz elbowed Agent Walter Sketch in the eye.
There's sometimes where he's just heartbroken and hopeless, because it feels hopeless.
Diaz's wife, Kendall, says he's been working to get a visa for 2 decades, fighting against an order for his deportation that came after an assault charge when he was a teen. The affidavit shows Border Patrol were surveilling Diaz April 29th, trying to take him into custody under that order.
My husband is not a bad person, and I know that he did not intentionally hurt anyone if that's what happened.
Diaz's family also traveled from the Yakima Valley to be in the courtroom. It is the first time they have seen his face, even heard his voice, since he was arrested late last month.
My mom says this is the worst nightmare. Just
This her worst nightmare has become to her day-to-day living.
They say they'll make the trip for every hearing to show support and share Martin's story in a fight for justice.
This is his place. This is where he grew up. This is all he knows. Everything of him is here. He's being ripped from his life.
If convicted, Diaz could face 20 years in prison and have to pay $250,000. And, Kendall says, unravel any chance he could stay in the country.
Well, if he were found guilty, it would make it impossible.
Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Welcome to the historic Browns Addition neighborhood. It's a neighborhood with lots of renters near downtown Spokane. Matt Good's been renting his apartment here for 8 years, but he says each year gets a little more challenging.
Everybody's rent has just gone up so significantly over the last couple of years, and I know people who have had to move to other places just because it's frankly just not a sustainable model like the way the housing market works right now.
It's a frustration he says he sees not just in Browns Addition, but across Spokane. And it's one that may get easier going forward thanks to House Bill 1217. Landlords who want to raise their rent for their tenants have to cap that increase at 7% plus inflation or at 10%, whichever is less. Governor Bob Ferguson signed the bill into law this week, And one of the votes in favor of it passing is Washington State Representative for District 3, Natasha Hill. She says the new cap is necessary.
There have been some additional costs to our homeowners and housing providers, but not the kind of cost increases that are justifying them taking advantage of a market where we simply don't have enough housing for everyone, especially affordable housing.
While she's relieved the bill is now law, she acknowledges it's a temporary solution for Washingtonians, and specifically Spokaneites, as they adapt to what she says is a growing population.
It's going to take some time, though, for us to increase the supply at the rate that our population's growing, that the need is there. So we're going to need, another 10 years for that to happen.
The bill also has its opponents, like members of the Rental Housing Association of Washington, who argue it's bad policy.
Rent control has been proven again and again in every jurisdiction it's tried to have unintended consequences, such as higher rents, lower quality of rental stock, and more importantly, the shrinking of the rental stock that's available.
But for now, folks like Good are excited to see a change in how much renters like him may have to pay each year.
The fact that they're actually putting a cap on, what landlords can charge is really just a huge victory for the people, because we all need a break right now.
As we go to break, here's a check of your weekend forecast.
It's gotten harder. Like, everything is harder. Like the price of gas and insurance for my car and groceries for my kids and clothes. And so I often use services like Vanessa Behan very frequently, like weekly, and really rely on them to help with that kind of stuff.
Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Week in Review. It's been a busy week across the Inland Northwest, and we want to help catch you up on some stories you might have missed.
Pressure.
Put a little pressure in here.
Something Steve Snyder has mastered while brewing beer and while pushing for state legislation.
I wrote a letter. I said, I've got to tell her the whole story.
Steve's story built up inside of him for decades.
I didn't know there was a word for what was happening. I just knew that I didn't like it.
The word for what was happening is molestation.
So I was 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, it happened over a number of years, and then I was finally able to say, keep your goddamn hands off of me.
Steve says his priest abused him and his brothers for years.
But I looked at that happy kid, and I look at this guy right here. He doesn't look too happy. That was when the molestations were happening. And I saw a happy kid, and then I see a kid that's kind of closed off. So it kind of hit me last night looking at the comparisons of those two.
That's the story Steve told to put pressure on lawmakers.
It's a relief that it's finally here, and the kids will be okay. The other part of it is now we have to enforce it.
Enforcement is something the bill's sponsor, Senator Noel Frame, already thought of.
It's essentially in the misdemeanor category, and it's a penalty and a certain number of days in jail.
But for clergy members, it's not that simple.
We want to protect people, and we want to especially protect children. That we're on the same page about.
Where the pressure between both sides starts building, though, is with confessions.
The seal of confession is very sacred.
The bill does not make an exemption for confessions.
I would not break the seal. I would instead receive the consequences of the law. If you talk to most every priest in this diocese of Spokane, they would say the same thing without hesitation.
If they don't want to subject their faith leaders to the punishment of state law, they can change their rules in their faith community. But we believe the protection of children is of the utmost importance,
We can limit the damage with bills like this.
Damage that took Steve a long time to heal from.
There came a point that I was strong enough inside myself to deal with this. But today I'm in a good place.
A place where now the most pressure he has to deal with is in his beer.
It's worth it.
In Spokane, Nicole Hernandez, KREM 2 News.
Hello, I'm Cody Proctor. Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 News. You're watching the Week in Review, where we bring you some of the biggest news stories of the past week.
When you walk by the Spokane County Courthouse, you may not notice the 361 names displayed outside.
Their service was selfless, their sacrifice immeasurable.
A memorial honors those from across Washington state who have fallen in the line of duty. This year, a young husband and father was added to the list.
Christopher was tragically struck by a motorist on Interstate 5 in Marysville.
Trooper Christopher Gadd died March of 2024. He was only 2 years into his service, received the top academic award from the Washington State Patrol Academy, and is survived by a father and sister who also serve in law enforcement.
As you can see, there is a rich tradition of public service in the Gadd family, which is to be recognized and commended.
While his family couldn't attend the service, others stood in tribute to all those they have lost.
Nothing prepares you for that kind of a loss. It tore through my world like wildfire. And grief did not come quietly for me.
Meg DiBucci has dedicated 26 years to helping families like her own. An officer herself, she lost her husband, then fiance, while both were on duty.
I was covering on a high-risk felony stop outside the city limits when he fell nearly 100 feet from an overpass to his death.
So as people gather today, the weight of the sacrifices those who wear the badge make in the line of duty was deeply felt throughout the crowd. Reporting in Spokane, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
With the sounds of tradition and somber silhouettes to honor the lost, Northern Quest Resort and Casino held a day of awareness and remembrance of missing and murdered Indigenous people.
Native Americans make up less than 2% of the population in the United States, and yet our missing and murdered rate is 10 times that of all the other nationalities, and it's heartbreaking.
Here in the Heritage Hallway at Northern Quest Casino, these red dresses symbolize missing and murdered Indigenous women who make up half of all missing and murdered Indigenous people in Washington state.
In Washington state alone, there are 112 missing Native American persons identified as of April 15, 2025. Half of these cases originate in eastern Washington, according to the Washington State Patrol.
That number has gone up by 1, says Resort and Casino General Manager Nick Pierre.
As one of our own is directly affected by the ongoing search for a missing relative, on behalf of the Gallup Miles family, we ask you to remain vigilant and help us search for Malia Yala, a 15-year-old Colville tribal member who has been missing for over 2 weeks. Your family writes, Malia, we love you and miss you. Please make contact so we know you are okay.
This month, Spokane's YWCA is fundraising for the cause. The Kalispell Tribe Charitable Fund will match up to $5,000 in donations made until May 31st. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
This is KPBX Spokane.
Spokane Public Radio is a decades-long national public radio station broadcasting entertainment, music, and local news across the Inland Northwest. Their content and what they provide across their airways is Program Director Doug Nadvornik's baby.
One of the nice things about it is I have the ability to
determine what stories we cover. If I think something is important, we can put a little more time into it. We can put a little more effort into it.
It's an effort Nadvornik says presents challenges in their funding. President Donald Trump signed an executive order eliminating federal funding for both national public radio and public service broadcasting. Since 1967, those taxpayer dollars were distributed to hundreds of public radio stations across the country through the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. For Spokane Public Radio, that's $250,000 or 10% of their overall budget.
We are looking at replacing that 10% of our budget in other ways and just, tightening our belts a little bit.
President and General Manager John Decker says the announcement of the funding loss didn't come as a surprise. Right now, he says he's reviewing their budget to find any ways they can save money that don't affect the amount of content they broadcast or the staff that creates it.
We've got a plan in place that is going to make sure that we emerge out of this fiscal year into next fiscal year, that we emerge through this very complicated process in one piece.
And Decker says a part of that plan is potentially growing their operation in both the news and the arts they broadcast with their community partners.
I see an opportunity for us to grow. It ain't going to be easy, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but we'll figure it out.
It's a process Nadvornik's excited to be a part of, and he knows he's not alone.
We raised a lot of money from our listeners during a 2-day pledge drive last week, and we got the message that, hey, we're with you, and we want to make sure that what you have been doing for 30 years, we will continue to do.
Connor McAvoy.
Stay tuned right here to Spokane Public Radio.
KREM 2 News.
Every time I go to the grocery store, I just stress a little bit more because it's just a little bit less money that I can use towards groceries.
Welcome back. Before we wrap up this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review, we want to remind you that you can get the latest newscasts and weather forecasts anytime on KREM 2 Plus. It is free to watch and download for Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. Now here's one more story before we go.
Well, as you can see, I am surrounded by all these beautiful flowers in this giant refrigerator at Skyline Flowers in Spokane Valley. Now, staff tells me here business is still going, but customers are being a little bit more cautious on what they're buying this spring season.
Well, Mother's Day is definitely our busiest time of year.
May is go time for the flower business.
We sell lots of flowers, even more than Valentine's Day, because not everybody has a lover, but everyone's got a mother.
But whether it's your prom date, your graduate, or your mom, their favorite flowers may have traveled across country lines.
Flowers actually come from Colombia and Ecuador, a big chunk of them, roses, carnations, daisies.
Goldberg notes some flowers come from California, but many growers have closed up shop, which causes more reliance on imports from South America. From the Trump administration's tariffs, Skyline Flowers has seen a 10% increase on cost.
We've only put 7.5% on our customers, so we're eating a little bit of it with them. So we are seeing a little bit of decrease in profit, but not enough to necessarily hurt us.
Goldberg notes weathering the storm with his customers is important.
Sharing the toll of what it's cost to do business and being able to have them know that we support them as best as we can also.
While his customers are being more careful in what they buy.
People are worried, and flowers are a luxury item, so people don't necessarily need them. It's, milk and eggs comes first, and those are expensive too.
Skyline staff tells me that they hope these tariffs go away, but for now, prices will just remain a little bit higher for holidays like Mother's Day. Reporting in Spokane Valley, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for joining us for the KREM 2 News Week in Review. Keep it here on KREM 2 for more news throughout the weekend. I'm Cody Proctor. Thanks for watching.